Donna Schuurman is one of my mentors. I have learned so much about working with teens and children from Donna. And as you said, she is going to be speaking about 5 life lessons from teens who are grieving. Dr. Donna Schuurman has a 35-year history with the Dougy Center, the first bereavement center for children in the United States. She is an internationally recognized authority on grief and bereaved children, teens, and families. Donna is the author of Never the Same: Coming to Terms with the Death of a Parent. Donna served on the board of directors for the Compassionate Friends and is a founding board member of the National Alliance for Children's Grief. Welcome, Dr. Donna Schuurman.
Thank you, Gloria and Heidi. What about teens? How do they grieve in a world that wants us to move on? 5 life lessons from teens who are grieving. Believe me, there are probably 50, 500. Every teen who comes to Dougy Center has 1 or 2 life lessons that we who've worked with them, listen to them. It doesn't matter how long, we still can learn things from them, and they're learning from each other. First group was held in December of 1981. So we're entering our mid-4th decade of working with children, teens, young adults, and families who've experienced the death of someone in their family. We do bereavement groups. The second photo there from our Esperanza Spanish-speaking groups. The third photo there represents our Pathways program, which is a program support groups for children and families who have a family member with an advanced serious illness. And then the 4th panel, LIGHT, LYGHT, which stands for Listening and Led by Youth in Foster Care, Grief, Hope, and Transition. So we've adapted the Dougy Center model to work with youth in foster care because very often, most often actually, in speaking with them, we found that their grief and loss issues were not being addressed in ways that were helpful to them. We have probably, I want to say, close to 80 different support groups going on at any one time. I mentioned the Pathways group. We have teen groups, littles groups for 3 to 5-year-olds, kids groups, 5, 6 to 12, teen groups. We have young adult groups. We have specific groups for after a death from violence, after a death from suicide, after a death from substance use, after a death from long-term illness, and also sibling groups. Our kids groups are for 3 to 12-year-olds and their parent, caregiver, or sibling groups. Our teen groups are for 13 to 18, and they could be a parent, caregiver, sibling, or, as we know for teens, close friends as well. And then our young adult groups, 18 to 40, they're 18 to 24 and 25 up, could be a parent, caregiver, sibling, friend, partner. And then our Pathways program for kids who have a parent, caregiver, or a sibling with an advanced serious illness. We added this group, I'm not sure, I want to say 10, 15 years ago. I think it was 15 actually, for moving kind of upstream for families who have a family member who's in the hospital. And prior to having these groups, we would only have families once the death had occurred. And they had so many issues that it was evident could have been addressed while the person was hospitalized or in hospice that now couldn't be addressed. And so we started those groups, and they're really amazing. We also, for teens, just a little slide about how we want grief to work. We want to get from here to there, wherever the imagined there is. And how it really works is like this tangle of things. The metaphors are everywhere in terms of waves of grief or all different nature metaphors. But the reality is that there's no one way to do it, no correct way to do it. no standard way that we should do it. And that's really evident when you start listening to teens and their experiences. One of the things I want to mention before I share the 5 lessons that I've selected from things teens have said is that we often hear, and honestly, if you Google grief, for example, you can go to the American Psychological Association, American Psychiatric Association, all kinds of places, and they will very often say grief is an emotion. And I think we need to understand and really broaden that. Grief is not just an emotion. When we are grieving, our bodies, our physical bodies, our brains, our immune systems, our relationships with other people shift. We have physical symptoms. We sleep, we can't wake up, or we can't sleep. We have nightmares. We have stomach aches, headaches, all kinds of things. So we need to really broaden that grief is not just an emotion. And we also need to look at the social factors that influence how people grieve. And I just have to throw this in because in the field of thanatology, the study of grief, death, dying, from the Greek god Thanatos, the god of death, there's this increasing and very strong movement to pathologize people who are grieving too long, yearning too deeply, and the standards by which those assessments are made are questionable foundations, which I can't go into right now. But I want to say that sometimes teens, especially, and middle school age youth, are acting out the pain, the anger, the frustration, the aloneness, the loneliness that they're feeling inside after someone in their life has died, because their whole life has shifted. And they're often medicalized. Oh, they can't sit still. They have ADHD. They can't sit still. They're depressed, and prescribed medication and over medicated, especially youth in foster care who are medicated at 3 to 4 times the rate of youth their same age and same social factors who are not in foster care. So we have to understand, and we also know that populations that are marginalized by dominating populations have increased risk and decreased access to support. I love how David said just in his talk that knowing he wasn't alone at 13, or thinking he was alone at 13, what a difference it would have made for him if he had really conceptualized, I'm not the only one, and I can get through this at 13. Next slide, please. So some of these factors that influence how children grieve: their age, their maturity level, prior experiences with death, the circumstances of the death, the relationship with the deceased, the response of others, which is huge, especially in this age group, family history, and also generational history and history of their identity, whether those are identities that are marginalized because their ethnicity or their sexual identity is marginalized by the dominating society, and cultural aspects. And also, so critical, what is the social support that they're receiving or not receiving? So I'm going to jump into, here are the 5 statements that we hear frequently in our teen groups. We prefer that you listen without judging or telling us what to do, think, or feel. Now, I would say this is probably true of the majority of adults in our parent groups as well, or caregiver groups, that there is no shortage for people who are grieving of people who want to tell them that they're doing it wrong, or they should, whatever it is, you should start dating, you should get out more, the shoulds become overwhelming. And one of our parameters, guidelines in our groups is there's no advice giving. No advice giving. Now, if someone says in the group, I have this issue and I really need advice from all of you, fine, but not jumping in with advice. And if a lot of people who are grieving, teens especially, are saying, as soon as I start to share how I'm feeling, these adults, whether they're parental figures, um, relatives, teachers, coaches, they want to make it better. They want to kind of take away my pain. They want me to feel better. And of course, I understand that they want me to feel better, but I need to be listened to. I need to be understood. I need to have that compassion that respects. If I don't ask for your opinion, please don't give it to me. A second common kind of statement from teens who are grieving the death of a friend, a relative, someone in their life. We do use the terminology frequently in our world for people who have died, the term loved one. And we also have to make room for not so loved one, or somewhat loved but frequently irritating, or even the option for a child, a teen, to be able to say, you know what, I hated my dad. I'm glad he's dead. My life is better without him. And where are the avenues that you do that? Fortunately, I would say in our 44 years at Dougy Center listening to teens, it's not common for them to say, I'm glad my dad's dead, or I'm glad this person is dead, but it happens. And we need to not glorify automatically and call every deceased person a loved one, because that may not be that teen's experience. We need to make an opening for them. I remember a teen in one of the groups, was a sibling teen group, and there was a 15-year-old sitting next to me, and he never talked in group. He just passed every time there was a question. And one day they were talking about, actually, the question that came up was, did you see your sibling's dead body? And that was a very lively conversation. And that was generated by one of the teens in the group. And this teen sitting next to me said, me and my brother didn't really get along. And that was the very first thing he said in the group, while everybody else was saying, my sister was so cool, my sibling was this and that. So we need to make sure we understand the language that we use and how it makes it open for teens to share. So a statement from teens, we want and need opportunities for expression, but they may not be what adults around us are offering. So I'm a big fan of schools in particular who say, well, we don't want to glorify a death. We don't want to romanticize a death or this person. And I always respond, well, you don't want to demonize them either. So how do you find avenues for expression? Because if you don't create avenues for expression and offer them, teens will find their own, and they may not be the things we really want them doing. But we've had kids like what helps me is working on my dad's car. What helps me is chopping wood. What helps me is being with my friends. What helps me is being alone, poetry, all kinds of things. So finding out from them what is helpful versus imposing what we think might be helpful. A third statement, we want honest information and do not ever, ever want to be lied to. I started as a volunteer at Dougy Center in 1986. Our founder, Bev Chappell, and I started the first group for kids 6 to 12 who'd had a family member in that very first group. It all happened to be a parent who had died of suicide. And the kind of stigma and judgment, not that it's gone away in 2025, but it was maybe even less understood in 1986. The kinds of things that people would say to kids around how the person died. They died in their car. Yes, they died of carbon monoxide poisoning. It was a suicide death. And what we try to say now to people is your kids probably know, even if you haven't told them. The way social media is now, the way adults talk in front of their kids, you can't hide things. And I'm not suggesting you should, but I have never in any culture I've ever worked in, at any country, and I've done trainings in South Korea, Taiwan, Italy, Germany, foreign areas like Los Angeles, and I have never heard one child or teen say, "I'm glad they lied to me about something that had to do with the death." I've heard many, many, many kids say, "I can't believe they lied to me. And I found it out from a friend. And now I question everything I've been told." So never lie. Because our friends are our chosen family and we're wanting to be independent, we may or may not choose to share how we're doing with a parent or other adults. We have to understand that in teen years, what they're striving for is really independence. They're trying to pull away from adult supervision, whether that's school, home, and find their own way. So they're not always looking for adults or parents to share with. I will say we do have teens who come who really identify more with our adult facilitators than they do with the other teens. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but we shouldn't be surprised if there are aspects of what they're coping with that they want to share with other teens. Okay, the fifth and final life lesson for today is it helps if we can find ways to still have fun and not have to grow up so fast. So a lot of teens who have a death, particularly, whether it's a death of a parent or a sibling, they have to grow up really fast. And they need to still find ways to be a kid. The world tends to respond to things with platitudes, euphemisms, awkwardness. Every cloud has a silver lining. They're an angel now, all these kinds of things. And what they really need, I think if you hit the next thing, we'll get the second column here on this slide. What they really need is reflection, acknowledgement, understanding, acceptance, space to grieve, listening. I want to share a closing quote from one of my mentors, Phyllis Silverman, who started the Widow to Widow program way back in the early 60s, who said, "If the language that we use is that of illness, then typically we want to seek a cure. We talk about grief in terms of symptoms, closure, getting over it, healing, and recovery. These words that we use all the time are the language of illness. There's no penicillin that will make grief all better. It is not an illness or condition from which one recovers." And thank you, Phyllis, for those words of wisdom and all the legacy that you have left to us. Dougy.org, we have tip sheets, a podcast, all kinds of things on our website for you to explore and invite you to. Thank you so much, Gloria and Heidi, for the invitation today.
I've learned that it helped me to help others, to know I'm not the only one, put one foot in front of the other, find a life.
Adding hope to the darkness, you start on the trip to recovery.
Reach deep down inside and say, I am going to live on.
We laugh, we cry, and remember.
Hope without action doesn't work. Hope with action can change the world.
We always say, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours.